Welcome to Dark Sorcery. I'm Alfredo Martinez, and I have with me once again Guion Hughes
Hey.
and Gazelam Ali.
Hey, Dark Source. Woohoo!
That's right. And our last video was Religion and the Occult, and this is a part 2 of Religion and the Occult. I've been excited about this video all day long. Let's go ahead and jump right into it. So now I want to get your guys' take on this statement here. The difference between a prayer and an incantation is a prayer uses hope, whereas an incantation uses will. What's your take on that statement? Seems spot on to me.
I mean, I like the way that's worded. I mean, the way I looked at it, I guess, is more of a prayer is more towards an outside being, more, you know, like an external God or spirit or something, and an incantation is more into your own higher self, you know, your own God, you know, your own being that you're trying to make into a God, you know. That's how I would look at it more. But I mean, I think that's pretty much fits into that statement, though.
What do you think, Gazelam? I'm gonna turn the
I kind of see hope and faith and things related to prayer to where mostly they're pretty useless. Maybe they can have a placebo effect on an individual or something, or like an incantation of being something where you're concentrating and meditating on something could actually have a beneficial technique, because if it is related to will, then that means action, which, you know, anything that can help you go towards movement and action opposed to some passive thing that's pretty much useless. I don't know. That's how I would see that too.
You know, if someone has if someone has faith, okay, obviously that's not the same as intent, because if you have intent, you are commanding, you know, reality to restructure itself or realign itself in your will, whereas hope is like, well, I hope it will if I pray enough, or I hope it will if I, you know, do this enough and that enough. I guess it's not the same thing.
Yeah, I mean, you bring up an interesting point, though, because and this goes into like chaos magic, which is really my specialty. Is you know, in chaos magic they have this concept called belief as tool, and so what they basically are saying is you know, that whatever you believe in, you know, that like it's maybe a placebo effect, you could call it that if you want to, or it's like where it came from is the story is that there were some Golden Dawn magicians, right? And the Golden Dawn, it's more of a Christian type of, you know, Gnostic Christian type of thing. So they were doing their things to the Christian God, you know, to Yahweh and Adonai, and they were doing these God names they would do, right? And more of that. So as an experiment, they actually stopped using those names, and they used some God names from a religion that H.G. Wells did in a novel, right? And and they were getting the same results. So they were like, that's belief as tool. If they believed hard enough that these H.G. Wells characters were like, you know, and we see that, you know, in chaos magic, like pop magic, you know. I mean, if you believe in whatever, you know, you believe in a pop star so much and say that's the goddess, then that if you believe enough, you'll get some result, you know.
You know, that's funny, because I don't know if you guys have seen this, but there's these videos online of this guy in India who worships Donald Trump.
Yeah,
and that's his God. You know what I mean? Which is funny, but I mean, I guess you could get, like you said,
a lot of people back south worship Donald Trump too.
Yeah,
all over the country.
Yeah,
but this also
but I mean, I guess that would kind of fit in the same category if they're constantly, you know, have Trump signs and stuff. It was just different to see a guy in the East have a shrine set up to him, and then he has like a portrait of him which he prays to every day, you know, and gives offerings and stuff. So it's like kind of like a shrine setup.
Yeah, it reminds me of the cargo cults.
Yeah, I was gonna say that, cargo cults. I was gonna bring that up exactly. Yeah, because the cargo cults were during World War II. All these, you know, all these people came with all this cargo, and they had all these provisions for these tribes that usually didn't see technology. They didn't see planes. They didn't see, you know, motorcycles and cars and all that. So they
Yeah.
they came through during World War II. Then when World War II, and this is like in the islands by Japan. So these are like primitive tribes. So after World War II, they all went back home. Either to Europe or America, wherever they're from. All the more civilized people, I guess you call them, right? And they missed them though, and they started a whole religion around the cargo, and they called them cargo cults. And they would make paper airplanes. Like they'd make airplanes out of palm fronds, and they actually
dress up like soldiers. And
some of the soldiers, they had pictures of the soldiers. One of them, I think, was the queen's husband. He's dead now, but he wasn't necessarily the king, but he was the queen's husband. You see this in that movie, the Queen on Netflix. So they had pictures of people that actually visited them, and those were like their gods, and they started a whole religion around that. And their whole idea was that someday they would come back and make them just like them, because make them so like they were primitive tribes, and they would make them just like say somebody in England. They would make their country just like England, or their country just like New York, and that was their whole paradise, their whole idea. So I was just gonna say that cargo cults is just a belief,
there's different cults like that, because there's the one you're talking about that worship King Charles or whatever, or Prince Charles, or there's that's John Fromm guy that they think was probably a soldier that's been lost to history. But yeah, it was all magical because all the cargo would come off these ships, and they didn't have any idea or concept of people working and creating these things in factories and different things. They were just all these magical items magically appearing, Right. They didn't know about these groups of agricultural things going on. And,
well, it's kind of like, in a way, it's kind of going in a circle, because I mean, like if you take a look, how they talk about the book of Ezekiel, the wheel within the wheel, and then the chariot of fire, and these different, did they see UFOs or some other technology? And then all of a sudden, now people made a religion out of that, But regardless, it seems that intent, whatever it is, it's universal. It'll work.
Yeah,
I guess whether you work with an egregore of some kind, or an actual being that's that has been around for a long time, I guess the result would be the same.
Yeah.
Belief is key.
Well, intent. It seems a lot of that was, especially in the Golden Dawn, was specifically working with archetypes, especially with the Kabbalah and with the Sephiroth, because in that system, you pretty much have a filing cabinet of archetypes, where that's what Guion was talking about, where, I knew chaos magicians that when Elizabeth Smart had been kidnapped and things, that they had superimposed that whole entire thing on the Tree of Life, or the Starship Enterprise, where the deck itself is Teferiuth, and then so when you're working with those chaotic gods that way and stuff too, it's really easy with Kabbalah, because you can turn the whole tree on its head even if you have to.
Yeah. I mean, that goes in another theory that I have, which I don't know if you two agree with this, but I feel that the gods, what we call gods, and all these gods, demons, angels, all these terms are just getting our heads around spirits, and a god is just a powerful spirit, So we all have a spirit in us, so people could see us, like you were saying, Donald Trump, this guy in India, he sees Donald Trump as a very powerful spirit, and he is. He's done some pretty big things. He's world known. He's famous, even before he got into politics, right? So he just sees them all. He's and I think that's how the gods were formed. There was probably somebody who was just a real good warrior, like and then later on they even forgot his name, and next thing he's Indra, or he's Brahma or whatever, and they just liken him to a god, and really there's probably based on real people. And I think that whole pantheon also of the Norse gods and the Roman gods, they're based on real people. You can tell because they act like humans. And even in Christianity, it says, humans are made in God's image, So I think it's alluding to that, that these were humans, or these were something like humans, and now we're seeing them as gods because they're just powerful humans or powerful spirits.
Well, now, okay, well then, now that you brought that up, Gazelam, isn't there a belief in Mormonism where they believe that people can become gods as they ascend more and more.
Yeah, I mean that's pretty much the essential hermetic principle of the whole thing, and it's baked even into the endowment itself. But it's based on a thing that Joseph Smith gave just before his death. That was a sermon called the King Follett Sermon, and it did talk about worlds upon ends, and we talked about it last week a little bit about multiple mortal probations, to where a person has to experience everything in order to become what they are now, and then what they will become, which are eventually meta human beings, or gods,
Right.
or or we could even create our own universes and stuff. When they talk about, oh, you'll get your own planet and stuff, no, it's a lot more cool than that. You get your own fucking universe.
Mm.
Well, it just goes to show that, humans don't realize how powerful they are. They really underestimate themselves, which is probably why in society we have so much distractions, all the sports and the TV and whatever else this entertainment distraction there is, it makes it, and plus everybody has to work all the time to make ends meet. You don't have time to meditate. You don't have, most people don't have time to sit and do these spiritual things and ascend, probably because, whoever it is that's put this system in place doesn't want us to realize our full potential and ascend to what we're talking about.
Yeah, I mean, I think that we talked about this on the first one a little bit too. Is there's a whole concept in Gnostic Christianity that the creator God is, they call him Yao de Bao, or the demiurge, is not wanting us to become a gods. He wants us to be more like pets or animals, something like that, lower than him. And the serpent that actually tempted Eve and said, eat this fruit, the forbidden fruit, it was forbidden because it made us more like gods. And that was like the New Testament God, or you could say whatever, you could say that was Lucifer, or you could say whatever, there's a different God, more of a Greek God, Greek-based God that wants to help us. Where the old God, the Yahweh, was saying, no, I don't want you to be gods. Next thing you're gonna be taking over my job. So
Yeah.
That's I think there's something to that, and that could just be human nature. We're fighting our own internal thing. If you want to look at it more atheistic, it's like, well, part of us is more than animals, because animals don't go around, doing these video podcasts like we do and all that stuff. That's not. There's no other being on this planet that
Right.
develops this kind of technology so far, at least. And
but then again, we did have a big jump in our evolution, like for a long time, we were like, very primal and like animals, and all of a sudden in this short span of time, we start developing tools and becoming very advanced and very smart, so obviously we had some kind of help. Maybe there's just, from the powers that be, there's two factions, some that want to help us and some that want to keep us down, and it's been a tug of war, for thousands of years.
Yeah.
We're starting to find more and more the even like Neanderthals were way more smarter than, when I was growing up, we were taught that they were like big rough cavemen, like me, get woman, hit her over the head with club kind of thing.
Yeah.
But with these cave art paintings and stuff, where they're starting to attribute those paintings actually to Neanderthals, the creativity of that. And yeah, it's crazy how the human species is just,
well,
really
I think
incredible.
I think it's got something to do with the fact that we do have a hidden history. Obviously, we know that the history we've been taught, it's, at least some of it is bullshit. And I think as the internet and technology gets better and better, the internet gets more used, more of that stuff leaks out. And so they can't hide, they have to admit, okay, little by little, okay, we lied to you about this, we lied to you about that. And so therefore what's being taught in school changes little by little.
Yeah, and I think there's a modern, I guess I don't know if you call it a religion or a gospel or a prophecy about the aliens, you know, and that's the whole theory what you were talking about, which I don't know if that. I mean, I think that's still on subject. It's kind of a religion, you know, where you know the whole thing of Roswell. You know, we discovered the aliens in Roswell, and the next thing you know, in a few years, we're you know flying to the moon, you know, and then next thing, like you said, the evolution of it's almost like we got this technology out of nowhere. You know, we've advanced in the last 100 years more than we advanced in the last 1,000 years.
Very
you know?
true.
So there's a lot of that, and I do see we were talking about the Matrix because I got my Matrix poster, and that's a fan of the Matrix. I mean, I do see that there is something to like the machines making us, or we're making the machines now. I think there might have been something like that, you know, because I mean, machines will last longer than our bodies, you know, and there is a lot of when I was into Christianity more, with Pentecostal, I would do some studying on this concept called intelligent design, and they were against evolution, you know, and I don't agree with all those things, but intelligent design says, you know, the most bodies, you know, most of these bodies, it looks like they were designed, you know, it wasn't that we just randomly came up with 2 arms and 2 legs and dogs just randomly, you know, developed that way, and spiders randomly developed. That these were probably from other planets. Either they came on, you know, by intelligence or a meteor or something, you know.
I do believe that you know, first of all, you know, it said, you know, what people, you know, the Bible, what a lot of people follow says that we were created in God's image. And I think maybe something extraterrestrial may have created us in a petri dish, you know, in their image, you know. So
yeah, it's funny because this all goes back to this what Guion was talking about. There are UFO religions and UFO cults, and the Realians, is that what they're called? Are definitely that way. They believe that Noah's Ark was like a bunch of petri dishes and like a DNA collection of all the.
Because think about it, guys. That makes a lot of sense. Because okay, so check it out. If you have I don't care how big your boat is, you're not fitting 2 of every animal on Earth on that thing. Let alone they're not just gonna walk up in there. You know what I mean? But it'd be a lot easier if you have DNA samples of each animal hit on that ark. You know, once the flood goes down, well, then you have your lab. You can just make more, and then they'll just populate the Earth.
Yeah,
that's a very, very probable theory.
Yeah, you want to take it to another level is that they actually, their founder was taken upon a UFO, and the 3 people on the UFO were Mohammed, Jesus Christ, and Joseph Smith.
What a combination, huh?
Yeah,
he's a French dude.
Huh.
Wow.
Yeah. Well, and these alien, you know, we think it's more of and it is more of a modern interpretation with Roswell and Area 51 and all that stuff. And I like all that stuff. I mean, I'm a huge fan. I go to I go on these road trips and pilgrimages almost to these sacred. I consider them sacred sites. You know,
like okay, yeah.
Yeah, but I mean, this has been around before. You know, like the Native Americans. Most Native Americans believed in they called the Star People. They believed in external people coming, you know, and creating from outside, you know. And I know Mormonism has some Native American stuff in it, you know. I mean, I think a lot of that because I was raised with with people from the Diné, with the Navajo tribe, and they were Mormon, and they were telling me, you know, it's amazing in Mormonism. They actually came up with these things that are in our ancient teachings for the Diné, you know. And I was thinking, you know, Joseph Smith probably just overheard this at a campfire and said, well, you know, because he's coming out here, he needs allies, right? So he's like, he heard some you know, Native Americans, you know, talking about this at a campfire and said, hey, I'm going to write this book and say, you know, that it's the natives, because there is a big native. I don't know if it still is, but there was a big native influx of people in the Mormon communities, you know, with Mexican and you know, which I guess Mexicans natives, but there's a lot of people here that go into that, and it's interesting to see those connections. Maybe you have more on this though.
It's curious because you know, and unfortunate in a way, because people that are indoctrinated within the religion have really strong roots to being Lamanite. And so you have a lot of indigenous people from all over the world, from Australia to to Mexico, to South America, to Polynesian groups that are all labeled as Labanite, and they really connect to it. But the thing is, I'm reading the Book of Mormon weekly with Aaron Ra and a group. Aaron Ra's a Satanist. It's funny because we're reading it, and you can really see the appropriation that Joseph Smith was throwing in the Book of Mormon on. Sometimes it's just cowboys and Indian bullshit, like woo, 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 kind of crap.
Yeah.
Okay.
So,
well, now that we're talking about indigenous people, now Gazelam, so in the Bible, people talk about the lost tribes of Israel, Ephraim and Manasseh. And correct me if I'm wrong, but a lot of Mormons believe that the lost tribes of Ephraim and Manasseh are actually Native Americans, Aztecs, all the indigenous people of the Americas. Now I know that some more how is that a popular belief in Mormonism?
Well, they believe that the lost tribes are either you are from Ephraim or Manasseh, but I think what it is Ephraim are Gentiles, and so Ephraim would be like the white European people, and then Manasseh is the Native Americans. Don't quote me on that completely, but like my tribe's Ephraim when I had my patriarchal blessing, and so they're just pulling it out of a hat, though. I mean, it really is up to the patriarch deciding where you're from. But they do believe that the Native Americans are part of the lost 12 tribes of Israel.
Because I remember when I was a Christian years back, and there was this one Bible teacher I was studying under, and he was saying that Ephraim and Manasseh is the United States and the UK. There's so many theories on that.
Well, that would make sense if they're saying the UK are the Gentiles, like a separate group of but that would mean that we were all Jews at one time. But I mean, essentially, if we came from Adam and Eve, then we'd have to all be Jews.
Well, when you look at the genetics of a Native American, obviously it doesn't say Jew or Hebrew.
No.
I remember there was a video that came out back in like 2003 that caused a big controversy in the Mormonism community, where it was talking about how Mormons and DNA, I think it was called, where they would take a look at the DNA of the Native Americans, and they say, well, obviously, if they're not Jews or Hebrews, well, then the Book of Mormon's not true, and then it just causes big controversy. And it was a VHS tape that was going around in Utah.
Well, it used to be that in the Book of Mormon it said that the Lamanite people were the people from the Native Americans, but they changed all the wording to say that they were among the Lamanites were among the indigenous people. So they've watered it down so much that they're just saying, well, it was probably this small tribe somewhere. But if you read the Book of Mormon, it's like page after page, you have 30,000 people die on this page and murder each other. And then you have another 20,000 people battling it out over here. And it's just crazy.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if it's changed at all, but I've heard that that's a big thing that it's hard for Mormons to prove, because they have all these huge civilizations and everything in North America, and it doesn't really, the archaeological evidence isn't really there. I mean, I guess you could say the pyramids in New Mexico maybe, but I mean, there's really not a lot of. I mean, we even see today, there's not a huge amount of like technology here, even as much
horses. Horses and sheep and cattle. And
I mean, I think the horses were here before, but then they got brought back over by
like 40,000 years ago, not 4,000 years ago.
Because I mean, I've heard that when Hernan Cortez landed, that he had horses, and they thought they were like these hybrid humans. Thought they were half horse and half human, and they
like a centaur.
Conquistadors odds or something in some of the tribes.
Right.
Yeah,
they thought they were one being. They didn't think they were.
They thought they were. Yeah, they.
That'd be like you pulling up to some nomadic tribe you know, in a Honda, you know, and then they think, oh well, this just must be one being, you know, he's driving.
Yeah, well, that's what
Makes some mythical creature up.
ties into the cargo.
Parse it out.
Yeah.
They thought that their equipment was part of them. That's the cargo cults. I think, you know, they thought that if you're driving a Jeep, you were the Jeep, and you know the Jeep was you.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean I mean you can see how that could like influence people and cause them to see I mean, and that's a big theory that that's my pet theory, I guess, is that, you know, technology and magic is, you know, it's just if we understand somewhat how things work, we call it technology. If we get results, and when we get results and we don't understand how it works at all, we just call it magic. And you know, it depends on your mindset. You know, I mean, if you bring I mean, I saw this one movie where they were showing how with a tribe that didn't have writing, and they thought that was telepathy, right? Like, imagine if somebody didn't have writing and you wrote something down and handed it to you and you read it, they were like, oh, how did he do that? You know, that's
because they don't understand it. You know,
well, I mean, a car is like a car is a time machine, you know, because you can go anywhere in such a shorter amount of time than you would if you'd have to walk or something.
Yeah. Well, I mean, these technologies do advance a lot, and people that have never experienced them, they would see them as magic for sure. You know, they and even us, we don't understand how they totally work unless you're a mechanic or something. Even like the phones we use, we don't understand how to make those. You know, and now at the point, only other machines know how to make those. So we don't totally understand. We trust them, and we just see it as technology. We don't say, oh, it's magical. Like there's a little.
Well, I mean, no doubt if you took a cell phone, you know, back in time, and then you turned it on and started flipping through YouTube and all these different platforms and stuff, videos and pictures, and people would probably think that that's like a portal into somewhere else.
Oh yeah.
You know, if they see something happening on the screen.
Oh, a Black Mirror. It's a Black Mirror.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But sweet.
Mm-hmm.
So let's go ahead. Let's go ahead and jump into what we had brought up before we started recording, and that's the fact that of Crowley trying to bring back Gnostic Christianity and Puritanism before Catholicism. So, Guion.
Yeah. So the idea of thelema, you know, which means will in Greek, you know, and thelema, agape, so love and will. What Crowley was trying to do, Crowley was raised in a group called the Plymouth Brethren, and the Plymouth Brethren were very puritanical, and it, you know, he saw that was like, you know, that's not what Christianity was originally. He saw it as not Christianity, which is more of a solar phallic cult, you know, like the cross was more like a phallic thing, even symbolizes some sexuality, and the sun. So like, you know, this is the Celtic cross, you know, it has a sun in the middle of it more. It's more like an ankh. You know, like goes back to Egyptian times, you know. So and this also ties into scientific, because Crowley was like, I want things that are more scientific for him at that time. You know, this is like the 1920s and stuff like that, right? So you know, we didn't even know that much about science back then. But even then, he was trying to say, well, you know, he saw science emerging, and he wanted to get more scientific in the religion. So he's saying, what is the most scientific thing that we could say is like a god? Because you could say, you know, Jehovah or Yahweh, or you could say these concepts, but there's no proof. And people just say, you know, hey, that's just your idea. You know, there's no proof. You know, you can't say Jesus come down here and do something and he doesn't do it. So he said, our star, the sun, and I don't know if you know his famous quote is, every man and woman is a star. So his idea, he had this practice, which is, it kind of falls with the Muslim thing of the 5 prayers a day, but he would say adoration to the sun. He called it resh, and he would actually you know, say that to get your spirit and mark it with the star, with the sun, because that's
right.
You travelest over the heavens in thy bark at the down going of the sun.
And then so that also, you know, cures the fear of death, because if you mark your spirit to the sun, you know, enough, you can start, you know, understanding that, you know, that there's a you know, that you're not going to die. You're paired with the sun, and the sun's going to be around for billions of years, you know. So and then you know, there's also things there where, you know, that's possibly like, you know, scientific creation. Maybe the sun the sun's rays are the only reason we have life on this planet. So maybe the sun created with radiation type language is us. So because it doesn't have eyes, the sun doesn't have eyes, it doesn't have feel. It created all this so we could experience the sun and other life beings through the sun. And that's kind of like our God. And that's how he saw Christianity in the past. And then he said, but when Christianity came, humans are corrupt, and they took all these kind of like Gnostic beliefs like that made sense scientifically and were powerful spiritual things for humans, and they were like, nah, we're just gonna make a pope and say this guy's he's like
just put it all on him.
And they mixed all this Roman crap. They essentially made a Caesar and said, the Caesar's the pope, and you guys got to believe what he says, and he's got his generals and all that stuff. And so they did that, and then eventually, they broke away from Catholicism, and then it actually went into like Puritanism, which is like very oppressive, like oppressing sexuality, hostile towards women, those kind of things that he didn't like. And so he was like, that's, Christianity got corrupt. And it used to be a solar phallic cult where they were more open with their sexuality, more loving, more maybe even polyamorous, and adorating the sun. Even the cross was just, looking up at the sun and adorating it. It wasn't somebody being tortured to death, like which is really dark if you think of it. We don't even think of that. I mean, because we mentioned last week about Lucifer and Jesus possibly being spirit brothers. That's a Mormon belief, and they have that in other Gnostic things. The Christ part of it would be more of the darker side, dark, because we're actually, he's dying, I mean, the symbol of the religion is a man being tortured to death and supposedly coming back. And if you try to do that, you probably won't come back. So, I mean, it's very dark. It's very dark. People don't see that. They see it as just, whatever,
Well, I mean, it seems to me that the Roman Catholic Church kind of invented modern day Christianity to be a religion for the poor people, give unto Caesar what is Caesar's, and do this and do that, but you'll get your reward after you die.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Kind of. What do you guys think about that?
The slave god. I mean, they're worshiping a slave god, really.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I mean, and plus it's there's a lot of that in it's like a spiritual weapon. It's like saying, if you don't do these things, something bad's gonna happen after you die, and they can't prove that, but if they convince people of that, they can really control people.
Mm-hmm.
Well, those adorations are about self-empowerment and things, because it's also placing yourself within the universe. I mean, it's just like what Guion was saying with the 4 prayers. There's 4 adorations done at midnight, at dawn, at noon, and right at dusk. So, just back to the Gnostic Mass and stuff too. I mean, those are sexual rites and things, and a lot of it was borrowed from the Rosicrucian with the Rosy Cross is also. I mean, if you look at the Rosy Cross itself, it's pretty much like a penis and an asshole.
I'll never look at it the same again. Especially when I do that ritual.
Yeah, I mean, there is like some sexual things to these things, and I think Talima, he was trying to bring that up back because it got oppressed.
Yeah, go ahead. In your face. It's got a rainbow on it too. Anyway, what you were saying, Guion.
That's hilarious.
Yeah, I mean, and you see that there's these hinting towards that things, I mean, hinting towards sexual things. Even the cross, could be the phallus, and something like that, So there's a lot of things. It got mixed in, and I think what happened was, and we talked about this a little bit on other podcasts, maybe even last week. I'm not for sure, but I think that the interpretation that they took for the original sin was that the serpent was the penis, and that's like original sin. So it's shameful that we have to go to these levels of just having sex. Sex is shameful, and it's shameful that we have that, and we're like animals, you know, and it would be better if we were like gods, where we just were like snapped our fingers and made a child, you know, instead of having to go through all. I think that's what they're.
Yeah, just cut out all the fun, huh? Yeah. But I mean, you know, there's symbols of that hidden in modern day society. Like, take for instance, you have the heart with the arrow going through it, which obviously the heart is symbolic of you know, a vagina, and then the arrow is, of course, is a penis. You know what I mean? So you know, there's that, but a lot of people don't know, you know, if they trace back enough, that's what that actually means. But it's a common symbol, you know, shown to all ages nowadays.
That puts a lot more into the Three of Swords Rider Waite deck. Getting 3-hold or something.
I'll never look at that card again the same way. Every time I draw that card.
Even the act of the crucifixion.
When I'm giving a reading for somebody, oh, guess what is in your future?
Guess
no,
what?
I'm just kidding, man. Go ahead,
How many holes?
You can there's an analogy.
Let's do a Celtic cross on that.
You know, stabbing Christ with the spear and the nailing him. If you can see these things, they're just oppressed, you know. I mean, but it's like, you know, I mean, if you look at it, if you're able to look above this, even like as another whole other culture or aliens or whatever, if you look at this, a religion based on a man being tortured to death, you'd be like, what kind of religion is this? You know, and then you're like,
it's a religion of love.
Your rituals are symbolize cannibalism, symbolize vampirism, because, you know, the communion is like, you eat the body of Christ. That's symbolized cannibalism. You know, people don't want to talk about it, but I mean, then they turn around and say, well, witches are horrible because they want to do this or that or the other. But I mean,
the thing is in
your rituals, you're symbolizing vampirism. You're drinking symbolic blood and eating symbolic flesh, and you're saying that witches are horrible. It's like, you know, so there's
the thing is in Catholicism, it is not symbolic. Transubstantiation is literal. That's where the miracle is. The miracle is that the bread turns into the flesh of Christ as it enters into your body.
Yeah. I mean, I read a book once.
So you're a literal cannibal.
I read a book once
where
somebody took a blessed wafer and put it under a microscope, and they got kicked out of seminary for that.
Did he gag it back up? That's the secret. You have to gag it back up.
Oh man!
You see these things, they don't make scientific sense, and so, you know, I mean, and even in the Gnostic Mass in Thelema, I mean, I think they've outlawed this. I don't know if some places probably still do it, because, you know, Thelema, they have like the official OTO, but when I worked with Lon Milo Duquette, who's an archbishop, you know, he was saying he was going around and making sure people didn't do this, but they actually did put the blood of the priest into the wafers, you know, when they were making them. So they would actually put, you know, body, you know, the body blood
fluids in. Yeah. I know groups that were doing it.
They were doing that. Lon told me he actually was, you know, him and his wife went around and they were saying, yeah, we do that. Some of them would even like cut their finger, just smear it on top of each wafer. And like, but then, you know, in the 80s with the AIDS, you know, with the they were like, no,
yeah. I mean, the few times I did it back then, they were really specific about, it was mostly only members, and they were really controlled in making sure everyone got the correct wafer.
Yeah. Well,
because sometimes it's sexual fluid too, you know, it's not only blood.
You don't want to get the wrong fluid on that.
Talks about what's the most potent blood to use, even, you know, which is like, they say blood of the moon, which is menstrual
period blood, yeah.
And then they say blood of a child. I mean, it's very, you know, people are like, whoa, you know, and so, you know, and that's part of
blood of the child. Blood of a child.
Oh,
yeah.
That's why everybody was always got after Crowley for killing babies, because that was his big joke. He was killing babies.
Yeah. But he would
really?
Just duty to masturbation. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so now let's go ahead and talk about the mark of Cain. So, we all know the story. You know, Cain kills Abel, and then, you know, God says, the Bible says that God put a mark on Cain Some people say that it was an actual mark. Some people say it was symbolic. Then there's some religions that say, oh, well, that means that he made Cain black, and all the blacks are cursed because of their descendants of Cain, which is bullshit. But what's your guys' take on that? There's no consensus as to what the mark of Cain was.
The mark of Cain. It's a credit card. Maybe he has a credit card.
I mean, there is symbolism like the rocking R and stuff. We were talking about how in Mormonism, you know, they believe that Cain is still alive and he's actually Bigfoot. You know. So there's you know, because I mean, imagine somebody who can't die for thousands of years. He would look all like hairy and big, you know. I mean, and that's another thing that they have in the Bible, that people, you know, like the Nephilim, you know, that they were giants, you know, and that a lot of people don't talk about, you know, that, and probably the first humans were more like giants. They were probably much bigger than us, you know, that is what they believe. So you know, Bigfoot, they believe that, you know, that Cain is Bigfoot, and when you're seeing Bigfoot, seeing Cain.
There's a lot of Heartlanders that they're called. They're Mormon apologists that believe that the Book of Mormon mostly happened in North America opposed to South America, like other apologists. And a lot of them connect the Nephites with the Nephilim and with the original Jaredites and people that came over as being giants, because there's a lot of this underground people trying to do archaeology and dig up the giant bones and everything like that, because the early mound myths and stories, they were digging up large bones and thought that there were these giants, you know. And so it's interesting with Cain, because that actually comes what Spencer W. Kimball really promoted that in a book called The Miracle of Forgiveness, that was mostly handed out to teenage boys to stop them from masturbation. And it would go to really extreme lengths, like if you need to even tie your hand against the bed or take cold showers and stuff like that, you know. But that's what we would talk about around the campfire at Scouts, is like masturbation. No, just about Cain, is these stories about Cain and ghost stories. And I think one of the reasons that Spencer Kimball probably was really pushing that narrative that came from an old pioneer journal was really the only account of this guy that was riding his horse, and Cain came up to him and stood at the same level as he was at. His shoulders were equal to him on the horse. But I think one of the main reasons he was promoting that was because he was the main prophet during his tenure that overturned the priesthood ban, which is directly connected to Brigham Young's doctrine that the mark of Cain is directly black skin, related to black skin. So that whole racist doctrine was done away with in, I think, 1976.
1978.
78. Yeah, and so so blame it on Bigfoot instead, you know.
Yeah. Big thing with Cain in Freemasonry too, you know. I mean, they actually relate more to Cain, and you know, Cain is more like they consider Cain like a worker, you know. He's like the people, the workers, you know. You know,
well, I think you're talking about two-ball cane.
Yeah, that's it.
Which that's his symbol, because it's two balls and a cane.
Yeah. Two-ball cane. They also call that the rocking R. If you put it on the side, it looks a little. So that's the mark of Cain that they use, and they believe that they're people, descendants of Seth, which is, you know, the son that replaced Abel, was more like the priests, and they don't build things. They just tell people to do things, and they don't like them that much because they're masons, they're builders. And it also goes back to, you know, the Goetia of like how Solomon supposedly got demons to build the temples, you know, and demons didn't really mean a negative thing back then. They were just the people that did the heavy lifting, you know, like blue collar guys, you know, blue collar spirits. Yeah. And stuff like that. You know, it wasn't so negative as it is now. So they actually have a lot of with Cain in there, and that's why you see they call them the sons of the widow because they identify with Lilith, you know, the first wife of Abel, or not Abel, of
Oh
Adam,
yeah.
things like
Right.
that.
Some
So
people
a lot of that.
say that she's the spawn of Lilith, and or maybe even Samal.
Which
Cain is the spawn of.
I don't know how much, but I think a lot of Freemasonry got adopted into Mormonism. You know.
I wouldn't doubt
Oh
it.
yeah, for sure. In fact, in the Pearl of Great Price, there's an actual pact in the Book of Moses that that Cain makes with Master Mahon is the name, which is probably taken from the code word for Master Mason. But Master Mahon is the keeper of the great secret, and it's the pact that they make, which are the nefarious tokens that the Freemasons have. So Mormons believe that Freemasonry is the same as their endowment ritual, except that it's the ritual passed from Satan to Cain to all of that lineage through the Masons, where our ritual is passed from Elohim to Jehovah to Adam to, you know, Joe Smith, whatever.
Yeah.
So
And isn't it about there's like a Melchizedek priesthood that's in Mormonism, isn't that because there's like different priesthoods. There was like the Aaron priesthood with Moses and Aaron, and then the Melchizedek is more of a shadow. You know, we don't even know who it really came from, but it's like more of a secret thing.
They claim Melchizedek is, you know, Jesus Christ or connected to Jesus Christ, and those two tokens are specifically related to the stigmata of Christ. They also believe that Christ was nailed through the wrist so he wouldn't slip off the cross, and so that's called the sure sign. But they're the different handshakes that you have and things. So, you know, with Cain, and that goes back to the whole Gnostic Mormonism thing too, because you have Cain and Abel. Cain's offerings were fruits and vegetables. Abel's offerings was a blood offering, which that's what Yahweh or Yaldabaoth demands are blood fleshy offerings. He doesn't like girly green vegetables, and so he's all bitching to Cain about it, saying, I don't want any of your goddamn girly green vegetables. And so Cain's like, okay, well, if you want a blood offering, here you can have one, and kills Abel. Abel puts a mark on him so he'll be protected. That mark is specifically to go against is it not corporal punishment, but against having the death
When you said
penalty.
Abel put a mark on him, did you mean Cain, or are you talking about Abel?
No, that when God put the mark on Cain so that he would be protected from the death penalty, specifically.
And then he
So it's interesting.
banished him with the mark. That's wasn't it something like he banished him with the mark of protection.
Yeah, I go find the other ones, which were a completely entire different group of people that existed.
Yeah.
Separate from Adam and Eve.
Kind of like it messes up the theory that they were the first man and woman, because like how did Cain go away and come back with wife and kids? You know, where'd they come from?
Yeah, exactly. You know, where did the
Enoch.
What's that?
He built a city called Enoch.
Yeah.
Well, let's go ahead and talk a bit about Christianity, specifically Pentecostal Christianity. So let's talk a bit about speaking in tongues. So Guion, I remember you and I sometime back did a video on speaking in tongues. But you know, let's talk a little bit more about it, because I remember, you know, growing up as a Pentecostal Christian, you know, I would be in church service Sunday morning, Sunday night, and you know, people would start speaking in tongues around me. Some people were getting slain in the spirit. Some people were, I mean, just different things, you know, drunk in the spirit, laughing in the spirit, you know. And I'd look around and I thought it was strange. And I remember going up to the altar, you know, with my youth group, and every one of them would be slain in the spirit or speaking in tongues. And then You know, the pastor would put his hands on me and they could not get me to do none of that stuff. You know what I mean? But what's your guys' take on all that?
I mean, I was into it, you know, and I still use it even into my practices now. I mean, I think the technical term is glossolalia for speaking in tongues.
Glossolalia.
Then you know, the other things. I mean, all that stuff with the Pentecostal, you know, a lot of it's in the Bible. It says, you know, people that they follow Christ will like they will speak in tongues that nobody knows. You know, that's in I think that's at the end of one of the Gospels. You know, it talks about. Right. So it talks about that. It is in the Bible.
Well, one thing when in the book of Acts, when it talks about, you know, everybody began speaking in tongues, it says that there was, you know, fire on top of their head, and I never saw that in church. So I'm like, well, is this really from the book of Acts? I don't think so, you know.
Yeah.
But what's your take on speaking in tongues, Gazelam? I mean, does Mormonism have any of that in their history or their belief?
Yeah, they do. In fact, historically, Mormonism was a lot more Pentecostal. The very first Kirtland Temple dedication, I mean, all that was happening. Actual fire above people's heads kind of shit.
Wow.
But the glossolalia was in it early on and then discouraged and then brought back by Brigham Young accidentally, because the first day that Joseph Smith invited Brigham Young to church, he got up and started speaking in tongues. And the congregation had heard from Joseph Smith that it had been kind of lay on the down low, let's do this anymore. And so they look all astonished and are looking around like, oh my gosh, what's going on? And as soon as Brigham Young finishes his testimony in glossolalia, Joseph Smith walks up to the front and he says, Brother Brigham was speaking in the true Adamic language. And so that's how he saved the day. So he was speaking the pure language of Adam.
Yeah.
Well,
yeah.
Do you guys believe that, let's say, when you hear someone speaking in tongues, would you say that's sort of like some language from another realm, like say an angelic language, like Enochian is supposed to be? Or is it just, you know, maybe it's some people just bullshitting for attention?
I think there's both of those things.
Yeah.
Enochian is in my practice, because I've studied a lot of Enochian and I work with Lon, you know, because he's really big into it. Lon Milo Duquette, he was really into the Enochian, and we did that for a year. You know, every week a group would meet and do that. I think that's the thing is you're speaking directly from your subconscious a lot of times, you know, and some people fake it and some people it really happens. I mean, at this point, I mean, I do it alone a lot. So, I mean, I'm not, who am I faking it for? You know, like my dog. I mean, you know, so like, I mean, I'm not, I mean, I think it's a good way to, you know, it's an incantation like we were talking about earlier, right?
Yeah.
It's an incantation. And, you know, even if it's something that like maybe when I get a thought that I'm where I feel like embarrassed about this thought or something I did in the past that I think is bad, I'll say that and it kind of banishes it, makes it a little better, you know. And it also, you know, I think when you do that with people, you know, either they think you're completely crazy or they're taken aback. So a lot of people do that too, because it's like it gets a reaction because you're like,
it does.
Whoa, you know, you're like, whoa, this guy, I don't know what that is. I don't know nothing about it. And if it's somebody who's not spiritual at all, they're just like, I don't want to mess with this guy, you know, or I don't know whoever's doing it, guy or gal or whatever, you know.
Yeah, but they say I don't want nothing to do with this, and they just never.
Yeah. I mean, a lot of
you know.
The same thing goes for, and I think a lot of that is, you know, even the imagery with the dark, with more like the dark siders and darker occult, left-hand path. You know, I think a lot of the imagery is just there to say, you know, like, hey, you know, don't mess with me. I'm into something you don't understand, you know. And there's a lot of that stuff, you know. Like I said, it is in the Bible. There is also, you know, which these are practices that I would never encourage. And you probably know because of the Pentecostal background, you probably both heard of this. It says in the Bible that people who are totally, you know, in Christ and taken over by the Holy Spirit will be able to handle poisonous serpents without being harmed, you know.
I saw asshole real get bit pretty damn good. Fucking killed him, man. Bam, right in the face too.
I've seen that too.
It happens. They do it a lot in the applications and more like rural churches. They literally bring out poisonous snakes and prove. And some of them also drink cyanide because it says that they'll drink poisons and it won't affect them. So they try to show their power in the spirit, in the Holy Spirit. It's taken over them, that they can handle these poisonous serpents. They can drink cyanide and it doesn't affect them. But it's not true. And like you said, I mean, a lot of times they get bit. A lot of times, you know.
That's kind of like, okay, it's Sunday. It's time for church. Let's go play Russian roulette, and then after we'll go out to eat. You know.
Yeah. It's something like that, you know, and that's why it can be dangerous, you know, for people to, you know, and people don't look at that aspect of Christianity too. That there's things that are in the Bible that tell people to do that promote self-harm, essentially, you know, and even other people. I mean, those snakes, even though it's a pastor usually doing it, so they try to give them to other people in the congregation. Sometimes it could even like.
Yeah, and it's just a chaotic environment for that type of thing too, you know, because they're just lifting the snakes around and I don't know.
Spirit. I mean, all of that also the Pentecostal all that they call it a charismatic, the charismatic movements because that's why they're all animated and they're jumping around and they're doing all this and they put their hand and they go, you're healed, and you fall back.
Let the bodies hit the floor.
All that faith healing and all that. I mean, for most of the time, in my experience, that, you know, I think that people can psych themselves out and get in certain states, but it doesn't have to do with Christianity. I think that's just like a hypnotism type of thing. I think it's psychological.
Oh yeah, for sure. Mm-hmm. Definitely magic tricks.
Yeah, I mean, it's
the thing that's.
If you want to do these,
I just want to go.
You want to do it, you'll do it. You know.
Go back to the Enochian thing though. Is that Enochian? I think is. As far as I haven't studied it super extensively, but it's curious because it actually has a syntax. And then when you look at barbarous names in, let's say, old Greek magical papyrus and things like the bornless ritual or something, the headless ritual, that, you know, a lot of those names do have historical connections to maybe past gods or even just different words that have been lost and things, where I think a lot of the stuff you see with on TV, it's just babblegook, especially like you know, let the angels of Africa, hala hala haka hala kala hala kaka. you know, there's like you could sit there and say, okay, well, let's write down all these different words and syllables and like try to connect it to any kind of language or something, and you're not gonna fucking find anything but babblegook, you know.
Yeah,
you know, and
you
know, maybe Christians who actually believe that will say, well, there's a connection, you know, but it's all bullshit.
Well, every sound could take a meaning. I mean, even the sounds we're making now, people that don't understand English might interpret them as gobbledygook or whatever, you know. And even somebody who speaks English, but they speak maybe like Australian English, or they speak you know, like there's some people from England, they have like the rhyming slang and all that. It doesn't make sense to us in America, right? No, they'll come up with like, I'm going to take a butcher's book around the, you know, it's like, what the hell are they talking about? You know? So people adopt like different slangs and different dialects, and it doesn't make sense. I mean, even if I heard Russian, I would probably think, you know, if I didn't have any idea of Russian, it would be like, oh, well, that's glossolalia, you know. So I mean, I think that the subconscious mind, but a lot of times people are doing it just doing it, you know.
So from both of you, there's experience of seeing it done in practice. Are there common, not maybe phraseologies, but certain syllable things that get repeated more often than not, that's learned, that people actually learn and pass on to each other?
I mean, we could do a whole show on Enochian, and I could study up and stuff. I mean, it's right what you're saying. I mean, people have studied Enochian, and they found that it's not just totally made up. It's not just glossolalia. There is a certain thing. I mean, because, you know, they do have people that are linguists that create languages, like for example, like the Lord of the Rings languages, right? I mean, or like the languages.
Klingon.
I mean, those are not just, they just didn't make the words up like that. They actually literally create the, like, or Klingon, right? I mean, those, I mean, they actually make up, they have linguists that do that, and they've looked at that and said, well, that's what they've done, right? But then again, Klingon, I don't think is divinely, came from a divine thing. I mean, maybe John Dee and Edward Kelly just sat down and created a language, and they put a little, it is, human minds create language, right? So they created a language that has a certain syntax, that has a certain way of doing things, that isn't just throwing anything out there. But there's people could do that for Game of Thrones, like Dothraki or whatever. I mean, they create languages all the time. It's not like that's a miracle or whatever. I mean, it's just they were maybe early linguists, or they were smart people, and they created a language that had a certain kind of thing to it. But I mean, we could do a whole show on that. It's very interesting. It's called Enochian because they asked for the Book of Enoch because they didn't have that at the time. They thought that would figure everything out. And instead of just giving them the Book of Enoch and saying, here's a book in English, they had to teach them that whole language. And they were supposed
backwards.
Yeah.
Backwards. That's the crazy thing.
Backwards. And then they had to turn it around. And I mean, yeah. But yeah, I mean, I got a lot of the symbols. I've been there's a lot of the symbols of Enochian and stuff like that. I've got a lot of these things that they're powerful, I think, I think this is like one of them, maybe, like an alga. They got all these different ones. It's interesting.
Yeah, I like the alga. My buddy gave me his tablets and stuff, but I don't have them here.
Yeah, I've got a lot of Enochian. I'd have to study up on it because I haven't done it for a while. But in my study of Enochian, once I got some of the Enochian down and worked with other people, then the spirits gave me glossolalia, and instead of just doing Enochian, Jay and I would just get the that's similar, yeah. That's like the Sigil Day.
That's the coaster based off it, yeah. The black seal.
So it's interesting stuff. That would be a whole other show though on Enochian. It's
yeah,
really,
I'd be down, but. It's been a very good conversation. It's been fun. I guess we'll go ahead and call it a night. Anything you guys want to go ahead and say or plug before we go ahead and end it?
No, I think it was good too. And we have each other's kind of links in the contents if you want to subscribe to channels and all that.
Yeah. So once again, everyone who's watching, check out Guillotine Productions. That's Guion's links, and then all of Gazelam's links, including his.
Well, last time the screen was all fuzzed out, so I want to just show the cards a little better. The poker cards, you can see they're cool because the pips are French pips, and these aces are pretty rad.
Yeah,
French aces.
This is all available on your Etsy, right?
Yeah, this is so it has the 22 major arcana, and they're all Thelema-sized, so that you have the Aeon for judgment and stuff like that to really give it a good vibe. Our friend Tracy Snow purchased one of the big giant decks recently, so great shout out to her. Yeah, and also it was the 200th anniversary of Joseph Smith getting the plates from Moroni. And I actually got all 24 copper plates on the 200th anniversary in order to complete and translate the Grimoire of Mormon. So stay tuned for that.
Awesome.
Yeah, we'll definitely have to do a show on that when you go ahead and drop that.
That'd be awesome.
But yeah,
coming along cool.
Everybody who's watching, all their links are below in the video description. If there's nothing else, thanks everybody for watching. Thank you, Guion and Gazelam, for taking the time to come on.
Dark Sorcery. Woo!
Everybody who's watching, like and subscribe to Dark Sorcery.